very warm welcome to everyone for an extra special keynote, because we have not one, not two, but three library leaders who will be looking to the future with us for the next half hour. So for anyone who doesn't know me yet, my name is Kirsten. I'm Membership Officer for Philip Scotland, Chartered Librarian as of the past 24 hours. I'm not going to forget this. It's lovely to tell a room that people know what that means. But more seriously, I'm sure I don't need to remind any of you that the past 3 years have been unforgettable for the world, very much including our sector. But one of the many consequences of the pandemic was that none of our three immediate past presidents, Martina McChrystal in 2020, Cleo Jones in 2021, and Amina, Shah in 2022, none of them were able to welcome you to their conference in person. And I'm delighted to say that today we are starting to put that right, building on the foundations of three pandemic presidencies, three utterly inspirational women who will spend this keynote conversation together looking to the future. This keynote is in partnership with Philip's Winspiration, which is our programme championing and celebrating feminist values and voices within our women majority sector. So please do, before you leave, scan the QR code there to access our full resource collection, including a number of online upcoming events. Now, I've already just remembered that I've forgotten something. I have something for our presidents. So when we have an online conference, which of course is lovely, people joining us around the world, but we don't get the opportunity to give you your presidential medals in person. So can I take this opportunity, please? I think I've got them in year order. So Martina, thank you so much. Cleo, thank you. So they are engraved. They could be in any order, so we can deal with that at lunch if I got that wrong. Apologies. So when we're reflecting on leadership, certainly the emerging leaders in the sector, of whom I know we have many with us here today, especially for our conference newbies, I wonder if you could each introduce yourselves and let us know about your role, and perhaps share a standout memory from your presidencies. Martina, maybe I'll come to you first. Thank you.
Okay, is it working? Yeah? Everyone hear me in the back? I think this has put terror into everybody across Dundee and Glasgow, me with a mic, so here we go. So I'm Martina McChrystal. I'm currently Director of Library Services at the University of Glasgow. I became Director there in 2017 and I joined the University of Glasgow in 2015. Prior to that, all of my career was in public libraries, and in 2013 I was absolutely honoured and delighted to become Library and Information Services Manager of the City of Edinburgh Council, which is where I came into contact with my two fabulous colleagues here. Amina and I worked together on the launch of the first public library strategy. Amina was then CEO of SLIC. Cleo was head of schools, so we did a huge amount of work there looking at school library development and provision across Edinburgh. So I was incredibly lucky to come into contact with both of these. I came up to Scotland in 1997. I'd worked in Lancashire prior to that. And I suppose for me, it really was night and day. It was a really different landscape, a fabulous collaborative community. I'm sure we're going to talk about that throughout the next 30 minutes. My standout memory of the presidential year, well, obviously I can vividly remember Yvonne Manning handing over the presidential chain in January 2020, and literally 2 months later, all of us, our entire world had changed. I think the standout memory for me, I'll have two if that's okay. The first one was actually reopening our university library back in August 20. It was a really sunny day, which is unusual for Glasgow, but that was absolutely brilliant. But really, and all of you in the room have experienced this, that our much loved, much treasured, much valued library buildings being closed, and to be actually able to open the doors. It was click and collect, it was managed occupancy, but nevertheless the doors were open. That was a really memorable moment, and it just felt like we were on our way back. And my second standout memory is our very first ever Philip's online conference. We were all incredibly nervous. We knew that Dundee wasn't going to happen, obviously. And we went for an October date. And again, the work of the Philip's team, I think Elizabeth's in the room as well, the amount of work that Elizabeth and Sean did putting that together. But there's some real standout parts of that as well, because so many more people could actually collaborate, could share, could actually attend the conference. Maybe for the first time we realised that there were other elements that we could do with that. So it worked really well. But the one thing we missed, of course, was those amazing conversations, those light bulb moments, all of those things that we shared. So although it went brilliantly and it was really good, it is so great to be back in person. So, who's next?
Yeah, oh, so well said, Martina. I think that sums up exactly what we've been feeling these past 2 days, that actually reflecting on not just what we come together for, but why. And I think that's really been apparent. And Cleo, what about you?
Yes, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cleo Jones. 35 years a librarian. That starts to get a bit scary. It was actually only when I was looking at my career and I'm going, OMG, 35 years. And I started my career in a business library. I actually worked for Total Oil Marine, the French oil company, which was unbelievable. And after 2 years of working there in a very male-dominated environment, I knew that working in the corporate sector was absolutely not for me, and I took the next job I could back in Glasgow. So I ended up in school libraries in Glasgow, and I absolutely adored it. I loved everything about it. I loved working with the Waynes. I loved teaching. Where are you, Sarah Louise? I loved teaching those Waynes. And I do think that we have a skill set as librarians that teachers don't have, actually. It's because we have the shades of grey. We have that way of getting them to find out things for themselves. And I think that's what makes us a bit different, actually. And when I'm talking to all of you in this room, I know that all of you understand what I'm talking about. And that's really powerful. But sometimes it's a shame because, you know, when we're talking to other people, they're not getting it. So, so I went into school libraries, and then my school was being closed in Glasgow. It was a combined school and community library, which was fantastic, and it was in Ramilton, as it was called, in Glasgow, and it came across things I had never seen before, experienced in running a library, you know, with parents on their methadone coming in first thing in the morning, and you know, it was a huge eye-opener, but I absolutely loved every bit of it. School closed, awful, trauma. What am I going to do? Because I just saw myself as being that school. So those of you who've been school librarians for absolutely years, that was going to be me because I loved it so much. And then I ended up working in FE in Ferranisland College, and then from there I moved to head of the school library service in Edinburgh, which I again absolutely adored. And then for the last 7 years I've been working, the school library service was taken into the main library service, so I've been working, and again that's been so exciting to actually be involved with prison libraries, the mobile libraries, health and well-being in libraries. It's just been fabulous, actually. And in terms of the standout for the year, there was a few things, and we were just talking about it. Martina, who actually persuaded me to be her deputy, didn't you, at that point? So come on. And you know, I feel that I got it as a librarian's librarian. I don't feel that I've got a great and fantastic job or whatever, but I feel, you know, I'm one of you. I'm a librarian's librarian. That's why I like to be it. And so Martina handing me my chain of office during COVID in a car park, didn't you? The glamour of it all.
Edinburgh Park Station.
Exactly, and handing it over. And then I took part in every of the Sillips Ireland. All of those things were amazing during that year, and I learned so much. The only thing I was really disappointed about was not getting out to actually meet people in the different areas of Scotland. I would have loved to have come up at you know, the North East branch, and you know, it would have been great. But my standout then was the regathering that we had here. It just felt, I mean, it was like we were all coming out of some sort of deep hibernation, and it was just wonderful to see people, real people. And really, really exciting. So I'm really looking forward to the future.
Amazing. Looking to the future. That's what we like to hear. And it really was just people coming out into the light again. It's a wonderful moment. And I guess that sort of cross-sectoral experience, that really speaks to your career as well, doesn't it, Amina?
Yes, so I'm Amina Shah, I'm the National Librarian, Chief Exec of the National Library of Scotland, but I spent my career, as you say, I've done lots of different things, including working in the McChrystal Library in Glasgow, Strathclyde University. I volunteered at Glasgow Women's Library, that's where I did my chartership, back when they had a wee shop in Argyll Street, back in about 1998. And I worked for 14 years here in Dundee in the city libraries, which are still so close to my heart, where I really kind of, I just suppose, learned the trade of what it is and what it's about, i.e. people, 100% about people. And when I was here in Dundee, the service, to use an expression you said yesterday, cracked open. We changed, we completely transformed what we were doing to, instead of waiting for people to arrive, reaching out into communities and doing different things and actually asking people what might be useful for them within their library service. And it was a really exciting time. I've also been Chief Executive of SLIC, which was a massive honour, worked as the Director of Programme at Scottish Book Trust, which is incredible, worked at St Andrews University Library for years. So I have had a perspective across the services. And I think the presidential memories, how could I forget getting COVID the night before my conference? And I was so excited, there's going to be Damien Barr and Gemma Kearney, and I was like, I was going to see all of you guys, I was so excited. And then I got COVID the night before, and I was looking at the medal that Richard's wearing, seeing names of people that I knew in the past. These people were, to me, hugely influential, that I looked up to so much, and to see think of my name being alongside theirs, I thought was unbelievable. But to be honest, the presidential year, it was the young people that I saw that I thought was amazing. And you, Kirsten, are incredible, organising Winspiration, getting your chartership now, bringing an energy back to the libraries. You and Sean really kept it all going through that difficult time. But all the people that I met, went to Glasgow Caledonian, Heather welcomed me there to meet her team, and meeting different people from across Scotland. I thought, wow, what's changed here? But it was that cracking open again. It was almost like in the pandemic, I think it was Damien Barr that said, we realised we're in the same storm but not in the same boat. And then we maybe realised as well that perhaps what we had in libraries was the answer to some of the problems. And so after years of feeling a little bit like maybe what we're doing is perhaps redundant or not as exciting anymore, it became really real. People were missing that connection, whether it's students in university or whether it's people in communities, human connection and the space as experience became really important. So, and what I heard the past couple of days, it feels like we're at a point where we've got an opportunity to stand up, despite all the challenges of funding and everything else, to really stand up and say we can support this agenda of the poverty figures for Scotland came out yesterday. I was practically in tears this morning looking at it. How can we be in a situation where nearly 30% of children are in poverty? It's like Dickens. It's like we've gone backwards. We're going to be like Angela's ashes. But then you hear things where Nadine was saying that libraries made her a writer, and Zabir was saying that kindness and compassion when he was a refugee changed his life. And I think that we need to take solace in that, and the fact that we have so many young people entering the profession now where their values are really central to why they're here. They're not looking for career path direction, and things have changed completely in that respect. It's and obviously recognition is hugely important, but it seems like they're driven from a place of really strong values, which I just think is amazing.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think the whole conference has been one of hearts as much as of minds, and you can see that thread throughout your careers as well. I wonder then, we've obviously discussed the changes that the sector has been through and is continuing to go through since the past few years. How do you think, as library leaders across various sectors, how do you think leadership itself is evolving at this point in time?
Well, I think you do need to be out there, and I think we need to be getting to decision makers very much, because we sit in rooms like this and we all share because it's the kind of people that we are, and we know what we do and why we do it and the difference that we can make. But it is really, really important at this time that we get to the right people, to the decision makers, so they understand what it is that we can do. And we do need to go back into those communities very much. I mean, the pandemic, dwell time, whoever thought we would have a word for what it was that people did in libraries? They dwelt, who knew it? We didn't get the people that we normally get when they came back, and there was no dwell time, because for those people, they come to dwell in our libraries because they want to be there. They want to be gently guided. They want to be enabled and empowered to find out things for themselves. That's what's really important. But it is frustrating when we always seem to have to be fighting the fight of why we're here. And decision makers do still say things now, you won't like me for saying this, but you can get all the books on Amazon and they're very cheap, and it's incredible that the perception is still very difficult. And so we really need to get out there and market that what we do is about people. Absolutely.
I would say that's critical. It never ends, because I think there's sometimes you think job done. Oh, I've done that. We've told it, but these people change all the time in policy. I met Christina McKelvey last week. She came to the library, and I must say, I think she really gets it. And she was a Minister for Equalities before. I feel that she really understands libraries. But I think that embedding that kind of advocacy within everyone's job is critical, because we won't be finished doing it. You'll get a new set of people coming and you'll have to start again, and just making sure that happens all the time, I think, is key. But in terms of leadership, I think what's really interesting is that the model hopefully has altered slightly, and we're seeing less of the traditional what we might think of as an image of a leader. And we're seeing so many different sorts of leaders and diversity in leadership, which is absolutely critical for society and for us to keep on and functioning. But also, it's our responsibility when you're in any position of leadership, to do that advocacy piece, but also to widen it even further. And whether it's about, we talked a lot about women, but actually a lot of the things that benefit women in work, like flexible working or different things, benefit everybody. And it's actually about including more people from a wider spectrum that's really important for our profession, I think.
Exactly. I think and everybody's been in the same boat, and exactly what you referenced, that everybody was through the same storm. And Adele referenced that yesterday in her fantastic keynote. It was seismic change. It was once in a generation change in what we came through the pandemic and out again, and it's different. We're not going back to the workforce that the workforce that we had, the spaces that we had, the services that we had. All of those have changed. Some of them out of all recognition, and that's a big challenge for all of us in a leadership role about how we take that forward. And Cleo's touched on communities, and Amina's touched on diversity, but also I think for me, one of the biggest things that we have to face as leaders, and for any of you going into leadership roles, is really about managing mental health, about well-being of our staff teams as we embrace this new world. Some of it, the flexibility has been outstanding. It has changed work-life balances, but also there's that rebuilding our communities, a sense of isolation. So many of our staff found, working at home or working throughout lockdown really, really difficult. We're still building through that. And it's really challenging but interesting as well, how we rebuild our communities, about our services that were closed, but also bringing our staff teams back together. And some of that is in a more hybrid way. It's really interesting, in leadership in that space now, because it is so changed. But we've also got a chance as a library community to absolutely embrace that change. Libraries were able to step into those spaces overnight with everything that we could offer, about that we didn't go away, and that we keep talking about buildings being closed, but the services were still there. Everyone in this room played their part. and keeping that going, making sure communities were still connected, you know, just throughout that piece was so incredibly important. We've got to use that, and we talk so much about advocacy, but what librarians did across Scotland and right across the UK and obviously globally throughout that piece was absolutely phenomenal, and we've got to build on that as well.
I was going to say, do you think yesterday David said sometimes we overclaim and we need to stop doing that? I actually think we underclaim, and just when you're saying that, what people were doing is phenomenal. People I know in North Ayrshire, they were delivering food parcels. They switched around to whatever was needed. I remember, I know in Dundee, they were phoning up people who they knew were regulars, that they used to come and check that people were okay. And sometimes I think people don't realise that, because as a profession we tend to just do it. What do you think?
Oh, I totally think we undersell ourselves. The other thing during my presidential year was somebody saying that, you know, librarians have saviour syndrome and they've got to stop it. I can't stop it. That is why I'm a librarian. I probably do have saviour syndrome, but I think we can do. We had people phoning folks at home. We had services going out into the community. We had our drivers from the mobiles going in and doing all of that. People really do want to help. At the moment, with the Ukrainian situation, I've had staff who've just been desperate to go and support, and the cost of living crisis has been something that, again, these are things we didn't see coming, but we've been there. We're ready. We're always ready as a group of people to welcome and be open and to include people inside. So I actually do think that we undersell ourselves, and there's a lot of time that, particularly like working for a council, where other departments, if they take on anything, they're asking for extra staff, they're asking for extra money, they're asking for those resources. And a lot of the time, we're just saying, we are here. Why are you giving money to somebody else to do something else when we're actually open 56 hours a week? We are staffed, we're there, we're in the heart of every community. And that's really what we've got to get across, that we are there. And I think actually with the cost of living crisis, and it's terrible that that's actually been a real boost for us, but it has been the catalyst in Edinburgh, from the numbers being quite slow coming back in to really hitting the ground running with the cost of living crisis and saying what we're going to provide here is, the councils are saying about the heat banks and everything else, and we just thought, no, we don't want to do that, so we put on massive offers, family fun days, things that were going to be free, things that were going to be different, and creating, every library created its own welcoming space. So everyone's involved in that, and we saw some of our libraries were getting 150, 200 people for these particularly free children's events, and we've now seen that obviously is the way, and we need to keep doing that. We need to keep bringing the people in, and people who haven't come in, because we are able to support them in that way.
I'm so struck by the fact that actually what you're doing day in, day out as leaders, it sounds like so much of this work, it applies to all of us, even from our emerging professionals, our newest professionals who are at the first ever conference, to those decades of experience. It sounds like something that we can all do and must do.
100%. When I was in Dundee, I remember meeting a doctor who dealt with homeless clients at some sort of event, and I said, we have lots of homeless people in the library. And he said, don't be ridiculous. What do you mean you've got homeless people in the library? And then I brought him in, and we had a meeting in the Central Library, and he goes, oh my goodness, all my homeless clients are here. And I was like, I know, I told you, this is what's happening. Because a lot of the policymakers, it is just the case that they haven't been in to their library. So you're absolutely right, Kirsten. It's not for me or Martina or Cleo or Richard always. It's every single person that's making those connections in their community, spotting things, telling people, do you know about this or that, or saying to people, the local councillor or the relatives that they know, do you know that this is happening, that we can help with this problem, that there's a resource here. It's everywhere, and it's not up to someone else. And also sometimes you need to challenge the authority that's currently there. And I remember putting on a Mela when I was in Dundee in the Central Library, and oh my God, my boss hated me for it. Because her concern was health and safety, and there was a chapati making workshop, and there was somebody with drums, and what would people in ref say, and
noting all these down for syllabus 2024 in my head. Oh, Sean's got his list out.
But you just got to you got to try sometimes and do something different. And I wasn't a senior person at that time. I was just wanted to do good stuff, and I know that's what all of you are doing. I've seen loads of stuff, that the South Lanarkshire thing that's upstairs, things that have been happening that you've all been talking about, the Green Libraries Initiative, the workshops, and people aren't probably even telling you to do this. You just know that your communities want this, and you're doing it anyway, and that's what we need more of, and we need more people to amplify that, which you guys at Sillips and Slick do so well, but it's a really important role.
I mean, we're really lucky with that. I mean, libraries are essential has just been fantastic, because that's really put that front and centre, exactly as Amina and Cleo have expressed that. And some of the innovation that came out, throughout the pandemic, just within our own sector, things like, virtual reading rooms. Who knew? We were just using all of the equipment that they've been using in the anatomy labs. But suddenly, we were just opening up a whole world of discovery. And again, that was, our teams were thinking about this, thinking, how are we going to do this? This wasn't coming from us as leaders, this was coming from our staff who are just thinking about their communities, how we can change it, and some of the most innovative and incredible things have been coming out, as you've exactly referenced. Somebody's just had a light bulb moment and thought, right, how do we do it? And then that's where it becomes the really important part. You start, okay, I want this to happen, who do I need to speak to? And librarians are brilliant at that, absolutely brilliant about saying, you speak to that person, bring that together, get this partnership going, and then all sorts of amazing things happen. I love that idea of a Mela, by the way.
It was good crack.
I think it's back to what Sarah Louise was saying. It is the networking. All of us have to network all the time. And it was funny because I was saying to Josh, what we don't want, and this is what happens, is people say, oh, yeah, you're a great librarian, or you do this whether you're in a school or whatever, and they think, but that's just you. No, it isn't. We're all like this. This is what we do. We don't want them to think this is a one-off, that you happen to have one good person. This is what the profession does. We do need to make sure that people are aware of that, rather than think it's about the building or it's about the books. It is about, as Josh was saying, it's about the connection. It's about being there. It's about making, those connections. And that's the thing about whether you're working in an individual library, it's all of those networks, it's in the citywide networks, it's in the national networks, and it's in the international networks, because we learn so much from one another. When you look at what goes on, I can remember in Auckland, when they were opening their central library for the homelessness to come and sleep and to spend their night in. I mean, I would love that in Edinburgh. I might just die or death on trying to do that. But it is the kind of thing. We have a huge homeless community. They do come and use our services because it is close to the grass market, and they come in. And if we are there, we're much better. Colleagues from New Zealand who were telling me at Edge this year that they have to discuss with the Maori. Anytime they've got a new library, they have to discuss what is going in it, because they really want to make sure that it's really tied to the community. And I thought, we've got a new library in, say, Muir House, and we're all sat around and we're all the professionals. Have we actually sat down with the community and asked them? And I thought, do you know what? No, we haven't. And it's sometimes you just need someone to say to you, and you think, oh, because apparently with Maori, everything starts with food. And so you always have to have a kitchen in the library, because that's how it starts. Oh, brilliant. I would love a kitchen in our libraries. We could then do the chapatis all the time. But,
you can tell our sessions before lunchtime, can you? We're getting in the zone.
But, it's that kind of thing that we just need to get what we can do, and and the evidence for that, and the difference we make across, and that's the tough bit.
That asking piece, I think, is a really interesting one, and it's where it's complete shift from the previous leadership. I remember going to conferences like this 20 years ago as a new professional, and hear a lot about, you've got the authority, librarians know, and really, you wouldn't believe it, Kirsten, I know you're looking at my face, but genuinely having arguments with mainly male senior people about what the services were about, and how we know what people want. No, we don't. We never ask them. We never actually ask them. But I think there's always been a fear of giving up control, about the fear that what would you be then if you do that. And I think that's the biggest thing I think that's happened. There's a shift, and let's hope it carries on, is just letting go a little bit more of control. So your job is enabling amazing things to happen, not always directing every single thing and being right about every single thing.
That's so beautifully put, and I think just sums up the spirit of what I learned so much every single day from the three of you. So thank you. And I can say, as anticipated, I think we're almost out of time. We knew that we could go on all day, and sadly we can't. But I'd like to just, for a final question, bring it actually back to, you've touched on this just now, Amina, back to inspiration. It sounds like so often it's not actually about doing new work, it's not reinventing the wheel, it's getting the message out there about what we're already doing day in, day out, what our library staff are doing, often just without recognition. And it strikes me that, as we've talked about at length in Winspiration, we are a women majority sector, we're about 75% women. How do you think we combat that, both internally and externally, that perpetual underestimation that we are facing?
That's a tough one. That is a tough one, guys. I do think that things have changed. I did have a male library manager who told me never to apologise. Don't ever apologise. I can't believe that anyone would ever say that and think that that was the right thing to do. It is about getting ourselves into the right places, and you do need to see more people. Every institution, I would like to say, every institution at the moment is sexist, racist, and everything else that's going, right? That without a doubt, it absolutely is. And I think it's really now, you're starting to see a shift through. So in Edinburgh, for example, when we look at our numbers, we have lots of different people ethnically coming in at the bottom level. We're starting to see people move up, but there was definitely a ceiling there. And we just have to make sure that people can see themselves reflected. We have to reflect the communities in which we work. And so it is about, Edinburgh has an Equalities and Diversities group, which were people who from all different grades who wanted to come together and work on it. And so that's been fantastic, because I've been working with some exceptional staff, young staff who've been really, and they can see. So when we're looking for jobs, I then do contact all of the different organisations, the Edinburgh Caribbean, so everyone to say, look, we've got these jobs coming up. So you need to do things, but it is about being seen to reflect the society in which we're working.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is all about the empowerment piece. And right here, we have, of course, the very first woman National Librarian of Scotland, which is fantastic. And it really is. Yeah, but we're there. But it's very much about that, that visible, those people who are, going into those roles, and to say keep going. But empowerment is, to me, and you touched on networks as well. Scotland are amazing with that, and I would say to you as well, if you're in a different role and you don't have a network, get out there and create one, because that really starts bringing you together with like-minded colleagues, with individuals. You learn so much. And that really develops you as well. So I think that's to me the empowerment piece that leaders need to do. But as well, I think anyone coming into our profession now, you can move across professions. You've got transferable skills. Your skills are ultimately marketable. I don't think we do that enough. It is an amazing profession, and people do so many different roles right across the piece. And I would challenge you to find, anywhere where Sarah Louise just went listening to a fantastic session about people, our community workers, they're working in a social space, they're community people, they're teachers, they're all of these skills that are coming through for librarians. And we've got to be really clear about that, and not just librarians, it's information workers as well. I work with some incredible, researchers, with information scientists, that whole community out there. And again, if it's dominated, if it is 75% dominated by women, we need to see that going through. But empowerment's, to me, one of the key pieces.
I think we also need to recognise and acknowledge that it's systemic, it isn't about individuals. Yeah. And whether it's racism, sexism, homophobia, whatever, it's not by accident that you've got a situation where all these women are working in this profession and haven't got it. It's not by accident that people aren't managing to come in. It's because the system is actually against you. You might have outliers who've managed to survive in that situation, but it's not easy. I mean, I've got 4 children, and when I worked in Dundee throughout my career, I knew that my boss hated job shares, flexible working. It was basically like saying, that's the end of your career. And I couldn't afford for it to be the end of my career because I didn't have any support, so I needed to work. So it wasn't really because I was massively career driven that I've ended up doing this job. It's because I have 4 children and I needed to work. And, so I think that that's not easy, and I'm glad that it's not like that as much anymore. But those systems need to change from the inside so that it's more welcoming and accommodating for people, rather than expecting people to struggle through. Anne Matheson, who I really admire, used to work in the National Library of Scotland, and I asked her, when you asked me to do an inspiration, what was it like to be a woman working in the National Library of Scotland in the 80s? And she said, well, the librarian said to me once, it's okay, Anne, as long as you act like a man, we won't notice. Literally said that to her. You need to act like a man. And I think, we talk about imposter syndrome, and you might have noticed it was me from your wee board. But I think I love being an imposter. And when I'm not an imposter anymore, it's time for me to go. Because the thing about being an imposter is you're saying, I don't belong in this space, and therefore I'm changing it, and so can you. And you can come and change it as well. And otherwise, if you start looking and acting like everyone is the same, then that's no use. You're not carving a path for others to be able to make it a bit easier. And I think that we need to do, and just as you've said, Cleo, institutionally, these institutions are not by accident that these systems have been in place. It's because it benefited the people that it benefited.
Well, I'm glad it's not by accident that we have the 3 of you as our sector leaders. And as you mentioned, we have not 1 but 2 imposter syndrome inspirations coming up. So please do scan the QR code and join. As you can see, we've got a Padlet that's growing with advice on how we combat imposter syndrome, and not before time. I mean, 3 years has not been enough for us to benefit from your wisdom and your insight. So 30 minutes certainly was never going to be, but this has been the most illuminating, inspiring conversation. So can everybody please join me in thanking Cleo and Martina.